So you want to rule the world, but there isn't a convenient three-step process to controlling the thoughts of your subjects to retain power. Until now.
Today we'll be assuming that you already have a position of power over a population and have the ability to exact whatever need be upon them. If you have not attained this yet, I would recommend you first watch the video Enslaving Humanity Through Brute Force and Other Means, a Guide to Societal Domination, the prerequisite of this video, if you will. Now that you've caught up, let's analyze the idea of controlling education. The biggest question in your mind right now should be, how do I control thought? We'll get to that in a moment, but first, we must lay the groundwork. The easiest way to control a population is filtering the information they have access to. If they only know what you want them to know, it's much easier to manipulate them. The goal is to make them completely reliant on you, like a baby to its mother. Think of it like blinders on a horse. Their vision is blocked to keep out distractions. In your case, the information you give them will direct them, and the information you withhold is subtracted from their knowledge. Think about this statement. If you control what they know, you control how they think and process information. You can't control how they think. Or can you? Yes, you can. Reducing knowledge can only take you so far. There's still room for free thought. To get them eating out of the palm of your hand, you must control their education, which is where the next step comes in, controlling how people think. By controlling how people are raised and guiding their thinking as children, free thought can be bullied out of them completely. This kind of guidance should be instilled through everything, including but not limited to games, language, songs and music, school lessons and teaching styles, and summer programs. Fear is critical because it is the most basic human emotion and animal instinct. They need to be taught to be afraid and patriotic of their government. It would be ideal for them to have one figure to direct their praise towards and another enemy of sorts. The point is to indoctrinate a way of thinking that eliminates free thought and promotes a collective or herd mentality. Adults are a trickier case, but with enough persuasion and torture, they too can change their way of thinking. Remember, it all comes down to fear. This is why torture is the best way to train them, though it should not be the first resort. Other methods, such as propaganda and paranoia, are extremely effective and easier to enact on an enormous scale. Let's be honest, dictatorships are difficult to maintain. So to start, we'll be looking at relatively successful regimes.
Notable totalitarian governments from the past include the Nazi Party and the Soviet Union. The obvious problem with these are that they lost power. You are looking to keep this power for a long time to come and not fall apart, so we will not be looking to them as an example.
I cannot condone this even for a joke, so the next part is going to be removed from the rest of the video. There is more than one way of manipulating information. Recently, the last of Russia's independent press announced the end of their reporting due to Putin's demands. In the case of Russia, there is a falsification required to paint a positive picture of Putin to the populace. The government now controls what information people receive and pumps propaganda into their brains to create an ideal citizen for a dictatorship. While it is impossible to ask Russian citizens how they think, it is possible to look at the most popular search histories in the area. An article from the BBC titled Ukraine War, Russians Kept in the Dark by Internet Search attempted to do just that. The article discusses the Bucha massacre, where hundreds of Ukrainian civilians were killed by Russian troops, and how this affected their search history. The results implied and outright denied that the killings had occurred. This provides a new light to the information Russia is denying its citizens in regard to the war in Ukraine. Another disturbing fact unearthed relates to the find of mass burial sites in Lyman after it was repossessed from Russia. The article reads, "Several pro-Kremlin news stories blaming the deaths on Ukrainian Nazis were in the top 10 search results. The results originated from Yandex, which is the leading search engine in Russia. These results further the idea that Russia can control what its citizens know, rooted in the obscuring of their knowledge. They cannot educate themselves on what is truly happening, so they cannot see what is happening through the eyes of an impartial or even Russian-biased person. It is clear that the Russian government has succeeded in molding the minds of their masses. They even deny the facts to the rest of the world. It is irrational and horrifying that this is happening in our age, but it's the harsh reality. A less extreme example comes from the United States banning certain books. These books are a form of education that the government officials are prohibiting. Some examples, according to the 50 Most Banned Books in America by Jennifer Martin, include The 57 Bus by Dashka Slater, All Boys Aren't Blue by George M. Johnson, and Sold by Patricia McCormick. It is important to note that these books were not banned nationwide nor indefinitely. The reason for a book to be banned is unique to each situation. The most common reason is for its explicit sexual content, however, the underlying reason is the ideas being too progressive. Some people, who then go to the government, try to suppress these ideas by banning books and create a stigma that is hard to break. It is understandable why people would not want sexual content in their public school literature, but there are important subjects that are being discussed within those books. LGBTQ+ books make up 41% of books banned, with the reason often being for their sexual content. However, 22% of books banned total were for sexual content. The same reason is often given to books with a protagonist of color, which make up 40% of the total list. While these statistics don't have a definitive answer of why, it certainly hints towards people trying to cover up topics rather than face them. It may seem small, yet the fact remains that the government, even if driven by the people, are suppressing certain knowledge and education. Let's circle back to controlling information and elaborate a bit more. Russia is a great example of controlling how their public educates themselves, but there are plenty of other countries, including Eritrea. Eritrea is the most controlling over the media in our modern times, even above North Korea. Their government has been censoring their citizens' knowledge since 2001, according to the Eritrea Media Guide from the BBC. They have no freely reported news, meaning that their population is completely dependent on the government for any information. Their only media is directly controlled by their Ministry of Information. Similar to the Ministry of Truth in George Orwell's 1984. The Ministry of Truth controls the flow of knowledge and what people know. The entire society in 1984 is a shining beacon of an example for you. They destroy the past, which eliminates the hoping for something better and strengthens their grip on the public. This is demonstrated on page 39 and 40 when Winston says, "As soon as all the corrections which happened to be necessary in any particular number of the Times had been assembled and collated, that number would be reprinted, the original copy destroyed, and the corrected copy placed on the files in its stead." This process of continuous alteration was applied to every kind of literature or documentation which might conceivably hold any political or ideological significance. All history was a palimpsest, scrapped clean and reinscribed exactly as often as was necessary. This tactic makes your dictatorship come across as more appealing through destroying any knowledge that contradicts you. I promised 3 steps, and it's time for part 3, controlling thought. Controlling thought seems impossible, but it is. One of the tricks is to start young because the ideas stick more with impressionable children. Children are the future, making them invaluable, so you must treat them as such. 1984 demonstrates what the end goal is on page 24. It reads, "What was worst of all was that by means of such organizations as the spies, they were systematically turned into ungovernable little savages, and yet this produced in them no tendency whatsoever to rebel against the discipline of the party. On the contrary, they adored the party and everything connected with it." It was touched on earlier that propaganda is used to educate the public and turn them into a good citizen for a dictatorship. 1984 gets it right again, which can be seen on page 2. The black mustachioed face gazed down from every commanding corner. "Big Brother is watching you," the caption said, while the dark eyes looked deep into Winston's own. Down at street level, another poster, torn at one corner, flapped fitfully in the wind, alternating covering and uncovering the single word, "Ingsoc." Propaganda should come from every direction, just as it does in this book's society, to keep thoughts centered on the government. Another way to eliminate free thought presented in 1984 is by limiting language. The less words there are, the harder it is to express thoughts, making it harder for those thoughts to exist in the first place. This is seen on page 52 with the quote, "Don't you see that the whole aim of Newspeak is to narrow the range of thought? In the end, we shall make thought crime literally impossible because there will be no words in which to express it. Every concept that can ever be needed will be expressed in exactly one word with its meaning rigidly defined and all of its subsidiary meanings rubbed out and forgotten." It is a wonderful facet for a plan of controlling education to control how people talk. It molds them even more into the ideal citizen. The government in 1984 influences the pathways that a brain should think, with their limited language, piles of propaganda, persistent paranoia, and 2 minutes hate. The 2 minutes hate is ingenious because it creates a sense of camaraderie when everyone is banded together and hating the same person. It also gets the fire out of their system, so they are more likely to be complacent. This is seen on page 14 with the sentence, "The horrible thing about the 2 minutes hate was not that it was obliged to act apart, but that it was impossible to avoid joining in." So to recap, target the education of your public, aim for 1984, and fear is critical. Now go rule the world.